All right, everybody, welcome to the sixth YAM Guides Talk. So you want to be a mountain guide? I think today is going to be an interesting one. We often get a lot of guest questions about what your guide certification is. We also get a lot of guest questions about becoming guides. There's a lot of people who are working their way, from the beginning all the way through. And today we're going to talk with myself. I'm Jesse DeMontney. I'm the managing director at Yamnuska, and Jacob Dans and Tim Ricci, who are one more mountain guide and apprentice alpine guide, and just to get some insights there. So I'm hoping you guys are going to enjoy the chat. Everyone's kind of at a bit of a different stage and different backgrounds. So maybe what we'll do to start out with is get a bit of some introductions from folks, and so you can get a chance to know who's chatting. So Jacob, I don't know, why don't you give us a bit of an intro?
Yeah, hey guys, my name's Jacob Dans. I work here as a core guide, and like Jesse was saying, I'm an apprentice alpine guide right now. So still got a few exams left to go. I took my first exam back in 2017, so I've been working as a guide for 3 years now. And actually before that, I did a bit of climbing gym instructing as well. So I've been kind of in the ACMG for the last 5 years now. And I've been working at Yamnuska for the last winter season.
All right, thanks, Jacob. And Tim.
My name's Tim, as Jesse has mentioned there, and I guess I've been a guide since about 2008 is when I did my apprentice rock guide certification. I'm done the program. I'm a mountain guide now, and I finished that up. I guess it would have been last August, and I've been working at YAM since 2009 was my first job here, working as an apprentice rock guide on the cadet camp programs.
Excellent. Yeah, me. Well, I did my first guides exam, which was the apprentice rock. I did that in 2002, and I started working for Yamnuska in 2003, and I've worked for Yam ever since. And I finished off my mountain guide certification in 2010, and I'm now the managing director of Yamnuska. And I also have had the privilege of working with a lot of other ACMG instructors on the training and assessment program. So we thought today would be a kind of a good range of folks here. We're seeing someone who's in the program right now, someone who's just finished recently, and then I have a bit of insight from working on the different training exam processes. So I think we'll have some interesting conversations here. I think we'll turn it over here to Tim, and what he's going to show you just is a little bit of background on the ACMG process and what it is, what the sort of steps are for becoming a mountain guide.
Awesome, thanks, Jesse. Yeah, thanks. I'm just going to share my screen here with everybody so they can get an idea as to what I'm looking at. Great. So in Canada, the way it works to become a mountain guide is, first of all, you need to become an apprentice guide of some sort. And a lot of us typically start with either the guide training rock program, or we move into the guide training ski program. The way it works is in order to become an alpine guide or an apprentice alpine guide, you first need to get through the rock climbing program. And then from the rock climbing program, you would become an apprentice rock guide, and then you would either become a rock guide or you would move through to the apprentice alpine guide program. And then once you become an apprentice alpine guide, you would move through to become an alpine guide. And then there's the ski side of things as well. So you would go through the apprentice ski guide training program, and then from there you would become a ski guide. In order to become an ACMG mountain guide in Canada, you need to become an alpine climbing guide, and you also need to become a ski guide. And with those two certifications coming together, that's what makes you a mountain guide in Canada. Canada is an IFMGA country, so when you become a Canadian mountain guide, you become internationally recognized as an IFMGA mountain guide as well. Something that's you know, unique to the Canadian program, and a couple other countries do this as well, is that you can also become a specialty guide in Canada. And by being a specialty guide, you can either become a full rock climbing guide, you can become an alpine climbing guide, or you can become a ski guide. In order to get into the programs these days, the prerequisites have always been, you know, you need quite a bit in order to just get into the programs. And some of the prerequisites, just to lay them out, we'll start with the guide training rock program. Is for the apprentice rock to get into the exam, you need to have on your resume 15 short traditional climbs at a minimum of 10C. You need to have 15 sport climbs on the resume with a minimum of 10D. You need to list out any significant red points in the last year. So a significant red point would be, what are you climbing at your hardest ability? Typically, people applying to the program, those will be anything above 5'11" and into the 5'12" climbing range for significant red points on the resume. They're looking for 15 moderate length routes as well. So full day routes or long, significant multi-pitch routes. 2 or more very long routes. And sometimes those will be multi-day as well. And then any routes that are requiring any direct form of aid climbing in there as well. And that's what you need for your resume to get in. You also need for all of the programs, and we always maintain as guides in Canada, a minimum standard of an 80-hour first aid ticket in there. And then you need some letters of reference from guides that you might know as well. For the guide training alpine to get into the program, they're looking for 15 moderate length mixed alpine climbing routes, 5 long or multi-day alpine climbs, and then recent travel as well on ice fields and glaciers in summer conditions. In the apprentice alpine, you go through an ice climbing screening course, and you need to have on the resume 10 water ice 4 or harder ice climbs, as well as 5 water ice 5 or harder ice climbs. Then you go to the exam, you make it through the training, and you need to get recommended to go on to the exams for any of these programs that are up on the screen right now. And then once you've been a apprentice alpine guide for 1 to 3 years, you can then apply to do your full alpine guide exam. When you're applying for your full alpine guide exam, you need to show your personal experience as well that you've established within the last 1 to 3 years of being an apprentice alpine climbing guide. And then you also need to add some more stuff to your resume as well. So they're looking for 5 multi-pitch ice or mixed climbs that are grade 5 or harder, 10 single pitch sport climbs that they say 511A or harder on, 5 multi-pitch climbs, they say greater than 250 meters on the application documents there that are 10A or harder, and then 5 alpine climbs with a commitment grade of 3 or harder on there. And then you get accepted into the alpine guide exam, and then you would go and take the alpine guide exam. As far as the ski world goes, to get into the ski program, and correct me if I'm wrong here, Jesse, but I would say probably the most competitive program to get into these days would be the ski guide program.
Yeah, I'd agree with you on that one. You know, there seems to be a long list of people that are really interested in the skiing, and I know the folks over at the training assessment program have lots of resumes to go through every year.
Yeah, absolutely. So prior to getting acceptance into the guide training ski program, you need to send in a video of skiing, and it needs to be 3 minutes in length, and it's got to be filmed at the ski hill. And what they're looking for on that is they're looking for a free run in ungroomed black diamond terrain, 15 to 20 turns on 2 runs, and then GM and groomed black or diamond terrain, and then short radius turns on there as well. So you need to submit a video of yourself skiing to see that you meet the standard for being a ski guide. And then on top of that, you also need to submit your personal ski touring resume as well. And they're looking for a minimum of 3 years experience backcountry skiing in a variety of snowpack regions. and then 75 days in complex terrain in a leadership or co-leadership role with a mix of day trips and hut-based trips in there as well. So quite a few days of ski touring just to get acceptance into the program on top of everything else. You need a minimum of 8 nights of winter camping or as part of a multi-day ski traverse, significant experience in complex glaciated terrain. It's great to have some ski and avalanche industry experience. So something like ski patrolling would be a good example of something like that, or working at an industrial mine site doing avalanche control work. And then any other relevant outdoor experience that you might have in there as well. So a lot of people will include summer mountaineering experience on there, or climbings they've done, or significant objectives wherever they might be. And then other relevant courses and certifications as well. And again, you always need to maintain an 80-hour first aid ticket. And then one thing I forgot to mention there with the Alpine program is for acceptance into the Alpine stream or the ski stream, you need to have a Canadian Avalanche Association operations level 1 course to become an apprentice. And then to move on to the full Alpine guide exam or the full ski exam, you need to have your Canadian Avalanche Association operations level 2 ticket as well prior to doing your full exams. To get into the ski guide, once you become an apprentice ski guide, to move forward to the ski guide portion of it, again, you need to have the 1 to 3 years of experience working in the industry. The level 2, you need to have the AVSARS, so that's the Avalanche Search and Rescue course the Canadian Avalanche Association puts on as a prerequisite to get into the full exam now. And then you need to have a minimum of 30 days of documented guiding, supervised guiding. So an example would be working at Yamnuska and being supervised by full guides out of Yamnuska to get into the exam. And then as well, for all of this stuff, you need resumes and letters of recommendations from other guides that you've worked with or that you've mentored under to get into the program. And then you would go ahead and you would go for the full ski guide exam. So that's a bit of a brief outline. There's quite a bit more to it. And then a really good place if you have any more questions for this stuff is you can go into www.acmg.ca. And in there you'll find all of this information and more information as to how to apply and you know, other courses and other certifications and everything else that goes into applying to the training and assessment program to become a mountain guide in Canada. So hopefully that gave a bit of insight into what it looked like as a bit of an outline to get into these programs. I'll flip it back over to you if you have anything else to add there, Jesse or Jacob.
Yeah, maybe there's just a couple of things here. First off, just for the crowd listening in here, make sure you fire away on questions as we go. I know that there's a lot going on, what Tim just mentioned. We had a couple questions already, which I may as well I'll chime in there. One of the questions is, do we offer scholarships to do any of these programs? And basically the way that we've worked it at YAM is, you know, if we have guides who are committed to us and working with us, we have supported them going through the program. But typically the first exam that someone does is sort of on their own to, you know, to figure out, make sure they get the prerequisites, make sure they, you know, jump all the hoops and go through. It's a bit of a process and it shows some, you know, commitment to the program, I guess, just getting in. So feel free firing away on those. And we have another one here. Do you stand a better chance of getting accepted into one stream if already working through another stream? That's a good question. I think often those, you know, definitely the best place for getting your best answer for that would be to call TAP, but they have a bit of a point system in the way that they work, and I'm not privy to exactly the way that is, but I do know the more experience you have, the better your odds are. So for example, if you are an ice climber and let's say you're an apprentice alpine guide, you've already got experience working in the industry, and so that's going to, you know, be something in your favor for when you apply for the skiing program. Although it's not the only thing, it's not an accepted, you know, if you're in the program, you're not in the next one, so you still have to compete against the other resumes. So good questions, keep them coming. The other thing I would just add on there too is just sort of a bit of a time frame on there in terms of how long each one of these programs are. But thinking about the CAA and the first aid. What do you, if you want to mention a bit about that, Tim?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think as far as the time frame goes to get through the program, um, I can probably, guiding is a small community, so most of the people that a lot of us end up socializing with are also guides as well. And I can think of friends, I guess, who have gone, multiple friends who have gone through the program, and I could probably count on less than one hand the amount of friends that have completed the entire program in 4 years. I would say the average time frame for most people to get through all of the exams, so all of the ACMG exams, 80-hour first aid ticket, and the CAA courses, I think on average you're probably looking at 6 to 8 year in order to get through the entire program, to go from zero all the way up to being an ACMG, IFMGA mountain guide. So it's a lengthy process for sure. And everybody's path is totally different. But yeah, it's super rewarding, and it's a super fun process to be locked into. And it seems like a long time when and I'm sure would say, if you're jumping into a PhD or something and somebody said, you got 8 years to become a doctor, you're staring at it and it feels like a long time, but it feels like it sort of goes by pretty quickly when you're head down and training, and that's all that really matters.
Yeah, good points. I think one of the other things too, and which we want to talk a bit more about here is that the process everyone can see that there's some trainings and exams, but there's a lot more to it than that. And each one of the trainings can be, anywhere from training exam between 5 and 9 days typically. And, those shorter sections, you go, okay, well, that's not that long, seems pretty reasonable. But the reality to it is to even gain the prerequisites before you can apply, for most people is many years, because you don't gain the experience to be able to have sort of sound judgment by just rolling up and doing into an ACMG course alone. You need to have the pre-work that you put in, and the same goes after. So if you end up, let's say, in the guide training rock, you do the training to gain some of the guiding skills, and you're expected to be there at a high recreational standard. So those standards that are listed, that Tim listed there, sort of, let's say 10D for climbing, those are what we call like a demonstration movement standard. So you should be able to climb that easily while coaching people. So most people that come in climb quite a bit harder than that. And then when you go from the training to your exam, it's expected that during that gap in there, which is, depends on the program, but, say a couple months, month and a half, couple months, that you're expected to be out training, right? And put those skills into practice, so you got a good idea of how to use them, right? So, I mean, Jacob, maybe a question for you there. Obviously, you're going through that process right now. How much training do you put in between an exam or between a training and exam?
Yeah, a fair amount. The Apprentice Alpine exam is definitely fresh in my memory because I just finished that last August. And I think when I looked back through my logbook, I was out mountaineering an average of 1 out of every 3 days for the 2 months between my training and my exam time. So it's quite a bit of commitment for sure. But like Tim said, it's pretty nice to be solely focused on one goal and get kind of really dialed in at this set of skills that you've learned a few months earlier, and then show up on the exam and go get it, kind of thing. So makes for a pretty fun summer, but there's definitely some tiring moments, and you got to put a lot of work in to get ready for those exams because they come up quick.
Yeah, right on. I always, when I'm talking to people about between the training and exam, I always like to say, it could be worse. You could be doing something else. Really, you got to go climbing, right? So it's something we all love doing, and so basically you're building your skill set, having a good time, and aiming to be super solid by the time you hit your exam.
Yeah, it's pretty fun to be able to take time off work to go training with your friends and go spend time in the mountains for sure.
So I guess maybe what we can do is Tim, a good question for you here about one of the things we're going to talk about is some of the highlights that we had from all of us going through the process, and I'd love to hear something that sort of stood out for you
as a highlight for the going through the programs.
Yeah,
I think part of the highlight for me was getting to train with people. I got to meet a variety of different people that I believe will become lifelong friends. I mean, the bond that you form with somebody when you're training for an alpine climbing exam or a ski exam, the trials and tribulations that you go through, the multiple days of getting up at 1 or 2 in the morning, just up and down, through a whole variety of mountain regions, mountain ranges, I think the mentorship side of it was a highlight for me as well. I felt really fortunate to have mentorship from some really experienced mountain guides and some really great people, and I feel like those people have turned into lifelong, not only mentors, but lifelong friends as well. So it was the relationships that I formed along the way was definitely a highlight for me. And, just the laser focus that you end up on as far as traveling in the mountains. And, when I think back to becoming an apprentice rock guide all the way through to the end, the skill set that you gain is pretty remarkable. And what feels overwhelming at the start, such as short roping, as you're starting to put the pieces together as the exams come to an end, is also rewarding. And those skill sets are never-ending skill sets. It's always something that you're going to want to improve upon, and to just keep working and keep improving on everything, even though the program's completed. All of it's just super rewarding for me.
Right on, right on. That's great. Yeah. Another question here as we're going along. So I'm not sure who this is directed to, but what made you, maybe we can, maybe Jacob will give you this one. What made you want to become a mountain guide, and what do you like most about the profession?
Nice. Yeah. For me, growing up, I spent a lot of time outdoors, canoe tripping and hiking and all that sort of stuff. And I always thought it was just the coolest job those canoe tripping guides and stuff like that had, to be able to work outside all the time and just be outdoors. And later on, sort of early in university, I discovered rock climbing, and I met a few different mountain guides while working at Mountain Equipment Co-op, and kind of found out that career path even existed. And that really kind of switched me on to pursuing mountain guiding as a career. And it's actually what made me move out here to Canmore, and I've kind of been pursuing it ever since. And yeah, it's just been super rewarding and nice to meet lots of new people and show them the mountains that I love and give them the skills to travel in them. And always working on my own skills as well, and just being able to be outside all the time it's really quite nice.
Right on. Yeah, it's definitely a rewarding profession. I think, it's, brings a lot, I always like to joke around with people and say, I apologize if you're a dentist out there right now, but I always say, at least, if you're going to the dentist, you have a different feel than if you're going out for a trip, right? People sign up there, they want to be there. And, it's not sort of one of these things for a lot of people, some people like the dentist, but some people dread it as well, right? So most people don't dread what we're doing. And so you meet a lot of great people, and you stay fit too. I think that's one of the nice things too. If you really enjoy being active, it certainly keeps you, there's not a lot of sitting down, right? There's a lot of movement. Another question coming in is great. Lots of questions, keep them coming. So this one, tips to maximize training and getting experience while working 9 to 5. So good question there as well. One of the things I think that's important for people to understand about the training and assessment program is that you really need to view it as going to school. So, the people who are going to move through the process the quickest are the ones that are going to be able to dedicate the most amount of time. So if you're working 9 to 5, it is challenging. So you're going to need to be extremely motivated to, be the full-on weekend warrior. And, if you're thinking about the climbing side of things, even to the point where, if, let's say you're lucky enough to live in an area like Canmore, where after you finish at 5 o'clock, it's like you go get your gear and you do a few hours in the summer. Well, it's light until 10 or 11, right? So that kind of stuff goes a long way. I think, if you're in the climbing stream as well, maintaining some time in the climbing gym to make sure that your climbing standard is kept high. Obviously, that kind of thing translating over into ice climbing, into skiing is a bit more of a challenge, right? So it's hard to pick up your skis at the end of the day in January and go skiing because it's dark. But people do that too, I guess. Yeah, so I'd say really what you want to do there is maximize the time you have available into the activity you want to be, or where you want to be going with it. So if all you have is the weekends, it's, and you're just starting out, it's going to be it'll be a process to kind of get yourself up to the right level. And if you're already in the process right now and you're working a 9-to-5 job, I think you know the skills that you've learned, and those need to be practiced. So if there's technical skills like crevasse rescue, those things I always say should be a give me on the exam. So you should practice those well, and those are easy things to do at the end of the workday. Okay, so let's look at a couple other highlights, I guess, of the program. Jacob, do you have anything that kind of stands out there?
Yeah, I think like similar to what Tim said, like it is really nice dialing in the skills, and you do meet a lot of really great people, and you do form quite a bond going through those exams and all the hard work that you have to put in to get there. But like a singular moment on an exam that kind of really stands out for me as a highlight was right at the end of my apprentice rock exam. We were climbing up in the bowl area. We're doing this route called Excalibur. And we kind of got up to the very end. We're at the last pitch, and there's two groups of us going up, and we're parked right underneath this really cool looking roof feature. And the other group is kind of finishing up this scrappy little 5/8 corner. That's the regular route to go up kind of thing. And me and my buddy were kind of eyeing it up. We're in the back group right now, so we're not really in the hot seat. And the examiner turns to us. He's like, "Oh, it looks pretty good, eh?" And we were thinking, "Oh yeah, it looks pretty good, but I don't know if we want to blow it the last pitch of the last day of the exam kind of thing." It looked a little harder. And the examiner goes, "You know what? Exam's off for now. Go climbing." And so we got to finish the very last day, last pitch of the exam, climbing this awesome roof feature up the Devil's Right Hand to top out Yamnuska. And that was kind of the end of the exam. So that's kind of always stood out for me as a highlight for me on the exams for sure. Yeah.
Right on. Right on. Yeah, I remember. It's funny what you remember off of these things, because one of the things that people should recognize about the training exam is they're long. So, you might be doing 9 days in a row, and they could be, 12-hour days, right? So it's a big deal. You get tired by the end for sure. And that's why you need to be fit and ready for what's going on. But this one is, I remember it more than anything because I still think it's funny. And, you learn things from every experience. But I remember on one of the Alpine programs, I can't remember if it was a training or exam. I remember we were on day 3 or 4 of big long days, and we were coming down Mount Louis. So Mount Louis is, just to get to the base of Mount Louis, if you don't know it, it's about a 2.5 hour-ish approach, depending on how fast you walk, before you even get to the climbing. And then the climbing is, it's a fairly substantial length of mountain. It's a bunch of, we were going up the cane route, so there's a few easy pitches and a bunch of short roping and some more pitched climbing. So, it could be considered like almost like a 20 pitch route. So it's quite long. And then when you get on the summit, there's no easy way, right? You can't walk to the summit of Mount Louis. In fact, the cane route's the easiest route on there at 5.7. So, but when you go down the other side, you have a technical descent, which is, shorter than the 20 rappels that you'd think. But as you go down, I remember being there with my training partner there, and they're just knackered, right? And so he'd gone down, I forget what order everything was going. We kind of combined into a group, and we were waiting for the examiner to come down to the belay. And, I look over at him, and he's got his head on the wall, and he's actually asleep, right? So he's asleep sitting there. He's so knackered from these days, he falls asleep. And really, that goes to show you, you're working hard, and it makes you be able to go through some pretty full-on situations. So I think you learn a ton on these things, and you grow as strength-wise as a person, I think. So there's a bunch of interesting things that go along with all these training exams. Another question here. Thoughts and tips on building and maintaining your social network while becoming a guide, especially with family. Okay, good question. So, I mean, it's interesting. There's a range of, I'll answer here. Maybe there's a few points to touch on in this one. A lot of people who if you're going through and you're lucky enough to be young and, not have kids, you can kind of have a singular focus there. And a lot of people do that when they're younger, and just like you would in any other profession, right? And if you change careers or you're moving in once you have a family, then obviously there's just way more balls in the air. And ultimately, just like going to any other school, the grade kind of matters in the end. So you got to find a way to make that happen. So I'm building a social network. I think, really making sure that you have people who are out there willing to learn and want to go out regularly. And then once once you build your resume and you're inside of the training process, there's lots of people who are like-minded to train with, and making sure you get out as much as possible. I think becoming a guide, especially while having a family. When I finished, I had a young family when I finished as well, and I think it was one of those ones where there were some sacrifices made there to be able to finish the process. And I think there was a little bit of understanding and communication that made that happen, and then then it was over. And then I got to move on from there. And Tim, maybe you can comment a bit on that, because I know you've got a young family at home.
Yeah, for sure. I did my first guide exam, like I said, I think it was 2008, and then we had my daughter in 2009, and I sort of put all the guides exams and everything on hold. But we had a young one at home, and then just as I was about ready to jump into, I remember I had applied for my full rock exam when we were living in Squamish. We found out my wife was pregnant again, and I pulled the pin on that. And for me, I ski patrolled for a bunch of years, and I worked as an apprentice rock guide for a bunch of years, and I went down the rope access path, and I sort of thought that completing the guides exams for me with a family might have been a thing of the past. And so I put everything on hold until it would be 5 years ago now, and I was sort of at a crossroads in my life, and it was either jump back in. Like I said, I was doing process. I was working and doing business development, and I felt like I needed to educate myself or finish something. Just sort of what's the next goal in life. And I remember looking and signing up for online learning for doing an MBA, so Master's in Business, or I was looking down at the rest of the guiding stream. And I don't know what pushed me over towards guiding. I have a super supportive spouse at home, and I think she knows I need to be out in the hills, running around and climbing and skiing, and figured I'd jump into the ski path, or into the rest of the guiding stream. And for me, I think what made me feel more comfortable about doing it with a family at home with 2 kids is my kids were a little bit older now. My daughter, when I jumped, she's 13 now, so she was call it 9. My son was 6 when I jumped back into the program. So and I was working a 9-to-5 job as well. So leaving, working 9 to 5, and then Friday rolling around and having to run into the hills to train for exams put a lot of stress on my family. But I think having the kids a little bit older, knowing they were a little bit more self-sufficient, made it a little bit easier on me when I wouldn't see anybody, because I literally wouldn't see them for weeks on end for quite a few years to get through the process. So there was huge sacrifice on my family's part and on my part in order to get through it. So it was definitely challenging, but now that it's all over, we're sort of back up and running and on to the next thing.
Right on. Well, I'm glad you took that fork in the road. Your guests are lucky to have you around, and so are we. So that's great. And how about you, Jacob? So you're right in the middle of the process, and what's your thoughts on sort of maintaining your social network, or does it just totally shift?
Yeah, I guess like on exam years, it's always kind of been, you got to kind of push a few things away for the summer to have the time to train, and then you just kind of try to maintain as much social time in the evenings or on rest days as you can. And luckily out here, a lot of my friends are kind of doing the same sort of thing, whether they're training to be guides as well, or they're just keen to go climb the same routes that I want to go train on. So a lot of the social time ends up being training time kind of combined. And yeah, that's kind of how I've found the balance. But it hasn't been quite as hard. I don't have a family or anything like that, so got a little bit more time to to go out in the evenings and during the days and stuff like that. So it's been a bit of an easier thing to make happen.
Yeah, I think you can kind of see from whoever asked the question, it's a good question. You know, I think one of the big parts in there is that, you know, there's a few sacrifices that you need to make to dedicate yourself to it. And that goes for whatever. I mean, whatever kind of profession you want to get into, right? You're going to need to dedicate yourself to it. It's not given away for free. So there you go. Okay, well, what about now? The guides exams are kind of interesting, trainings and exams, because they kind of do bring out stressful times and you know, and they're challenging and they're designed to challenge you. And you know, what comes along with that sometimes is a bit of hardship. So I'd be curious to hear some thoughts from you guys on, you know, some of the challenges you had to deal with it, whether it was, you know, was it group dynamics, was it weather, was it difficult climbing? You know, what kind of stuff came up for you guys that stood out as being, that was pretty tough, and I'm glad that's over.
I think for me, the hardest sort of module or whatever so far has been actually the guide training ice course. So as part of the Apprentice Alpine program, you do a training course in the winter, January or February, for ice climbing, but it's kind of also a bit of a screening at the same time. You kind of have to get recommended past it. So it is a training course, but you do feel like you're in the hot seat a little bit as well. And just before it started, I got a wicked cold, and I was so excited because I was on the new February training course and it was supposed to be warmer, but unfortunately it was about -35 all week long. And so I was sick as a dog hiking up to all the ice climbs. And I think it's still the only time that I've ever had to climb and lead ice in my puffy pants and my belay jacket and my belay gloves. So I was just this huge puffball coughing my way up ice climbs all week and kind of made it happen. But it definitely wasn't my funnest week of climbing I've ever done. I think the hardest day was probably, somehow it was -35 and humid, and we were doing Guinness Gully, and I've never been so cold in my life, I don't think. So glad I'm through that one for sure. Yeah, what about you, Tim?
Yeah, for any of you guys,
pardon?
well, I was going to say, for any of you guys out there that are, you know, getting ready to go through this, I think you could pretty much put on your calendar that you could predict the weather is going to be -20 or below on that program. It's I've worked that program for the last 5 or 6 years, and I think there's only maybe been one of them that hasn't been cold. So it's like a rite of passage. Right? How about you, Tim?
Yeah, similar to you, Jacob. It's a story about getting sick on an exam. Mine was on, I guess, my first round on the Apprentice Alpine Guides exam. And we were up at the Cane Hut, which is in the Bugaboos. And as we were coming out of the Bugaboos, a couple of us started feeling a little bit off. And we remember, I think we went right from the Bugaboos to Lake Louise, and we did our sports day. So that's, you know, a bit of a rest day, but you're still going out and you're getting screened and doing all your rescue exercises on that day. And I can remember being at Lake Louise, and it was probably 25, 30 degrees at the back of the lake, which is right behind the Chateau, Lake Louise there, and having a down jacket on and having the chills and shivering and going back to the campground in Lake Louise that night. And I won't get into the details, but we'll just say that it was super rowdy. And we had the Lake O'Hara bus came to pick us up at 1 a.m. And we were going to do the South Peak of Victoria in a day, which anybody who's climbed Victoria, you know, doing it in a day on a guides exam is it's a pretty big day. And we were going to go up one way and down the other way, and I let out, so I had the first lead that day, and I've never been so sick in my life. And I can remember getting to the Abbott Pass hut, and you know, by this time it's only maybe 4:30 or 5 in the morning, and the examiner, you know, saying, you know, we can't really let you go on. This isn't good. And I just remember saying to him, just tell me when my lead's over. Just tell me when my lead's over. And let up a little bit more there. And I just before the black band, which is this feature on South Victoria there, and I felt the tap on my shoulder, and he just sort of said, you know, your lead's over, and can you make it back down to the hut? And I just remember collapsing with the coils on, and you know, somehow made it back to the hut and fell asleep sitting up at the table at the Abbott Pass hut. And I must have looked like a total mess, and some nice lady helped me up. And remember doing the old shiver sleep in the old green warden blankets at the Abbott Pass Hut, and made it down and ended up going up Castle Mountain the next day. But we all ended up having this strain called Campylobacter, and it was something we had all picked up in the bugaboos from something there. But that was rugged. I think it dropped 10 pounds in like 2 days trying to get through the exam. That was rugged.
Yeah, that's a rough story, but if you're looking for a weight loss program, I guess that works for you. Yeah.
Yeah.
Right on. Right on. Okay. Well, that's yeah. I mean, I think you can see here. There's a lot of hardship. I guess even in Kim's story there. I don't know if you'd see that happen in this day and age right now with what we have going on in the world. But I think a lot of people push themselves through both physically and mentally through these things, and I think that's a good. It shows sort of the strength. I think it's a lot of people might be scratching their heads on this, and that's a pretty extreme case. But one of the more like Jacob's there, what you really want a lot of times in a guide is to know that your guide's going to be able to deal with the difficult situations while making sure they can manage you too, right? And so I think it goes to show that people they kind of get put through the ringer a little bit, right? You get through some difficult situations, in super variable conditions and in unknown conditions, depending on your exam, and people who perform well are the ones that pass, right? And that's important, I think, as a guest out there, to know that your guides have been screened pretty well, and I think that's key to these hardships in there. I think we all have kind of hardship that way too. I mean, I can think of one for myself. I remember being on an alpine guides exam and being in the bugaboos, and it's snowing about 50 centimeters over sort of a day, and then having to go out in conditions and just wading through snow and trying to get objectives done, and it's just tons of work, right? And you're just knackered by the end of the day, and when you look back at the objective you did, it's like, well, it's not that exciting of an objective, but it sure was hard, right? And you sure had to deal with hazards in a different way than you were expecting on the day, and I think more than anything, it's just sort of mentally managing that kind of stuff and being, mentally robust enough to kind of be able to deal with the stress that comes along with it. So, certainly lots of us have stories in that regard. So there's a couple questions here. First one here, is it better to have a narrow focus, one stream as a guide, or better to have a broader range, all streams, in terms of client experience? Okay, well, in terms of client experience, there's maybe two parts to talk about really quick. One of them is about the training side of that. One of them to recognize with the training, if your plan, let's say, would be to become a mountain guide, and you're really only focusing on the rock, you got to recognize that there's also ice climbing, alpine climbing, skiing that needs to be dealt with, right? And the way the ACMG is set up right now is that when you pass an exam, you need to have a minimum of a year of experience, but a maximum of 3. So you can see in there's a bit of a time frame window where you need to gain. Basically, what's meant to happen in there is that you're meant to refine your skill set before you do your full exam. So if you're worried about refining your skill set plus learning how to, let's say, ski at the same time, and you're putting skis on for the first time, that can be a real challenge. So I think it really depends a little bit on what your focus is. If you really just want to become an alpine guide, or you just want to become a ski guide, then I think it's fine. Or your other option would be to hit between the 1 and 3 years and then go for the full exam in that category or in that stream. So let's say you're an apprentice rock guide and you think you want to be an alpine guide, but you're not quite there. At the 3-year mark, you would have to do the full, either the apprentice alpine, which if you're not ready for, you'd go for the full rock. And that would be an option for you. And then once you have the full rock, the rock guide certification, then that doesn't have a restriction on time. So then you could train more, and it can need more time, and then go into the apprentice alpine stream. In terms of a client experience on that, I think it depends a little bit. So, I'd say yes overall. And that's basically, if the more experience you have guiding clients in different circumstances, means that the better your client care is going to be, and the better you're going to be able to deal with varying situations that come up. But that's, you know, I know lots of guides who are specialty guides that do a fantastic job, and I wouldn't say that it's a deal breaker in any way. But you know, if you, as an example, as you move into, let's say, the alpine stream, if you're already a ski guide, you have a significant amount of ski experience or avalanche experience in terms of, you know, forecasting and whatnot, and that really comes to, it makes a big difference for, you know, I think avalanche forecasting. I think it makes, you know, if you're doing instructional kind of programs, it makes a big difference as well. So, yeah, I'd say yes, but I wouldn't call it a sort of a deal breaker or anything that's so significant that, you know, you should consider it to be an issue. All right, and let's see here. Okay, so another question here, which I'll answer, is working a 7 on and 7 off work schedule now. Is it feasible to become and work as a hiking guide on days off only? Yeah, I think so. I think that that's a feasible thing. I mean, you're probably doing that as a, you know, as something that you enjoy to do, and you're not necessarily looking to do that as your main stream of income. I think it'd just be a matter of lining up the trips with your days off and doing that. So I think, yeah, I think that's a possibility for sure. A lot of backpacking trips are, you know, the trips that we run, most of them are under 7 days, right? There's anywhere from sort of 3 to 6 days is kind of what we run. Although there is lots of day hiking availability as well. And okay. Maybe a question for you, Tim. What does Yamnuska look for in hiring a guide?
Yeah, for sure. So I would say, you know, somebody who's professional, somebody who's punctual, you know, shows up on time, you know, before it's time to meet their guests. I think a key component to you know, working for Yam is that client relationship. You know, the guiding is not, you know, there's hard skills for guiding, like when to put a rope on, when to take the rope off, crampons on, crampons off. But the soft skills are really important to be a good guide. So somebody who's really personable, somebody who can get along with people, and somebody who can work in a you know, can teach as well. I think often people have a misconceived notion that guiding is, you know, tying somebody into the rope and getting them to the top of the mountain. But a lot of the work that we end up doing as guides is heavy instructional and teaching as well. So somebody who's got the ability to not just get the person to the top of the mountain, but also has the ability to take a group of 8 people at a hut for 5 or 6 days, and you know, be able to teach them the skills that they need to go out on their own into the mountains, because that's what a lot of people are looking for these days. So yeah, personable, punctual, and somebody who can teach as well as guide.
All right, sounds good. Got another one here. We've got lots of questions coming in. Jacob, I'll ask you this one here. Well,
Oh, I think Jesse froze for a
Just
second.
froze, yeah.
We'll see if he comes.
what do you do currently to fully commit to?
I think he froze for a second.
Jesse, you're frozen there.
Let's just give him 1 second. Let's see what happens there, Jacob.
Yeah.
But maybe while we're waiting for Jesse to come back online, and we'll get to those questions that everybody's asking. Just keep asking the questions. Why don't I ask you a question? Just give me half a second here. Financially, Jacob, it can be challenging going through the exam process while trying to maintain a job and achieve the amount of training days that you need to move through the exams. How are you finding this? And what is your process?
Yeah, so the process has definitely kind of evolved over the years as I've gained certification. But when I first moved out here, I was pretty lucky to start working as a tech rep for Black Diamond. And I had some really understanding bosses that would let me go out when the weather was good and go training. And that kind of helped me gain my experience while still being able to work a professional job and save up for the exams. So that's kind of what got me started. And then also just trying to access funding out there as well. So scholarships through the ACMG and also the Alberta Job Grant and stuff like that. So those have all been little tools to help out along the way. But a lot of it has also just been making this my sort of one singular goal for the last few years and kind of putting all of my focus, time, and money into that, and kind of saying no to a few other things to make sure that I'm ready when it comes time to do the next exam.
Yeah, great. And Jesse, I just got that question handed over here, so I can read this question out. But it's while training and doing exams, what jobs did you do currently to fully commit to the process? What's that?
Same question there. I think that's the one that was just, yeah, you made it through, right?
Yeah, this is one that's asked. So it's similar to what I just actually asked Jacob, but this is one that came in. Let me read through here. Well, still, yeah. Yeah, exact same question I asked Jacob. So thanks for asking this question.
Yeah, perfect.
Back to you, Jesse.
Yeah, I think that's, it's an interesting one here. Once again, I like to sort of bring people back and just think about going to school. So it depends how committed you are. I think, a lot of, for a lot of people, if you were doing a degree in something, you would, work in the evenings, have a weekend job, you would work hard in the summer, you do that kind of thing. I think that's sort of the general sense what you got to kind of do here is find things that fit so you can do what you need to do. And that becomes a challenge. And I think it becomes more of a challenge as you get older and you kind of have more commitments, whether it's a house or a family or, those kind of things. So, it is hard to do. And it's also hard at the beginning too. So if you're in the skiing side of things, often what the skiing stream, what you can do is often get a good block of work, right? So you'll get into the winter and you'll have some kind of training around, December or so, and then you'll work all the way through usually until into the beginning of April. So you have a good block there, and that allows you to, make some decent income, and then you have a bit of training time on your weeks off, and then usually you have still some skiing time, skiing available season left at the end of April and early May, especially in the Rockies. So that's pretty straightforward. I think the ski side, the climbing side's a bit more of a challenge. The climbing side, you look at starting out in the rock climbing, and the rock climbing season is shorter, right? So you end up with usually not as same blocks of work, because often in the ski world, we're lucky enough to go heli skiing or cat skiing or lodge touring or teaching courses, and they tend to be longer. But rock climbing tends to be, shorter multi-pitch type programs and instructional weekends. And so there's less big blocks of work. So it's a little bit harder to sort of maintain and get through that phase. But once you get your Alpine ticket, that one there is the one. I think that's the ticket if you're thinking about getting a certification. It's like, which stream, if I'm going to do both, is going to give me the best sort of income first. It's going to be the Alpine one. You can work in the summer, you can work in the winter, and there's minimal time off in the shoulder season. So that's the one that gets you as far as you need to be, as fast as possible, I guess I'd say.
Yeah, it's been a big shift for me this last summer, going from juggling 3 different jobs and guiding and training to all of a sudden now just guiding full time and able to save up for the next exam, have time to train. It's all a little bit easier now that you can guide year round.
Yeah, it turns into a full-time job rather than sort of a seasonal job, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, so we've sort of looked at highlights and hardships there, and yeah, I guess maybe one of the questions that gets asked a lot with these ones, because these exams are hard, is, and people often want to know what's it about, is what's it like to fail, right? Or have you failed? And so I don't know if Jacob, how about you? Where are you at?
Yeah, so 2 exams down and I'm still good. No failures yet. Yeah.
All right, unscathed.
Oh.
That's good. Yeah, keep it up. And we're rooting for you on that one.
I think he froze again.
Yeah. Yeah. How about you, Tim?
Yeah.
Did you fail an exam?
I did actually. I failed one exam. It was the apprentice Alpine Guide exam on the first go. Um, it just wasn't a good exam for me. I wasn't in the headspace that I needed to be in for it. I had a couple really rough days on the exam with not great leads, and I just wasn't able to recover. When I look back at, failing on the exam, I actually think it might have been one of the best things that could have happened to me going through all of these exams. I think that when I failed, I wasn't focused enough, and I didn't train hard enough. And after I failed, I mean, geez, I took it quite hard, and with a family at home and everything, having to go back home to your wife and to your kids, and say that, well, hey, I got to do this for a whole other summer. I'm not going to see you guys. Was really hard, but failing, I feel, has made me a better guide. It better prepared me for the remaining exams that I still had to do, because I was hyper focused on those last few exams, and there was it felt like there was nothing that was going to stop me from training and putting everything I had into it. So I feel that failing was actually a really positive at the end of the day for my guiding career and getting through the exam process.
Great.
How about you, Jesse? Back.
Yeah. I mean, I've been through the ringer too, right? So this I guess like they say, time heals all wounds. But my first, the order I did apprentice back then. It was assistant rock, and then I did my assistant ski, and I did them like basically back to back. And when I did the assistant ski, I didn't pass, and I had it was rough. I think from the things that I struggled with early on, especially in the first two training exams, was really dealing with the stress. So, and I think to be put in the hot seat like that, and somebody's like looking at you at every movement you're doing there, it almost like bores a hole in you, right? And I think the skiing side of things, when I was there, it was you always, when you finish off, you always sort of try to, there's sort of this grief process that you go through, and you try and blame people, or you try and say, oh, it was bad luck, but in the end, when you reflect on it, you realize that for most people, I hope, and definitely for me, I realized that I didn't give a solid performance, and a bit more time is certainly was needed. And when I came into the next year and I did that exam again, it was easy. Right. So it was one of those things like, okay, it was almost like another training for me. And I reflect kind of like you did, Tim. Like, I just feel like that was, although it was really hard on a lot of levels, like financial, there's certainly a hit to people's egos. There's all kinds of stuff that happens in there. I felt like I came out a better guide because of it. And although I didn't enjoy the process of, failing, in retrospect, it was something that was, that was highly beneficial. And so after that exam, I did my apprentice ski, and then I did my full ski the year right after that. I felt really confident. I had a lot of work, and I did really well at that. I didn't have any issues with it. And sort of in that year where I did didn't pass the apprentice ski, I did the apprentice alpine as well, and I'm past that as well, and which was good. And I waited a couple years before I did my full alpine. Because coming back to somebody else's question there, it's like sort of specializing. I had done a lot more rock climbing, a lot more skiing than I had alpine climbing at the time, and so I just felt I needed a little bit more time to get my feet underneath me and guide. And when I came into it after a couple of years there, we had a challenging exam. So one of the things that ended up happening is that right out of the gates, it snowed 50 centimeters, and you're supposed to go like alpine rock climbing. So this was challenging, right? So the conditions are bad. You're making decisions in conditions that you probably are most of the time, especially recreational climbing. You just be like, I'm not going anywhere. So that one there, I certainly made a bunch of errors that, meant that I just, wasn't ready. And it was kind of the same thing for me as my apprentice ski. And while I felt more confident in going into it in my abilities, there was just some gaps in there that I needed to fill. And I did the exam the following year, and in 2010, 10, and I finished off with what they call one marginal, so one sort of substandard mark throughout the whole week. And that's one thing we haven't really talked a little bit about here, but is the grading system and how that happens. And right now, and this has sort of changed for the when I did my exams, so now working on them, is now I think it's quite a bit more transparent. And there used to be either just a pass, a marginal, or a fail. And the marginal was still a failing mark. So no matter if you got a mailing, but you needed a few of them to really sink you, and it needed to be a trend across time. Whereas now they still have similar. They can be failing, marginal, or pass, but they're rated out of 10. So you need, basically what you need is 70% to pass in a category. And there's multiple categories that are, that are examined on. And, if you get a marginal would be like a 5 or a 6 out of 10. And a passing mark would be, anything 7 and above. So, yeah, I think that's kind of my story with not passing. And I think when you look through the industry here, there's most people have at least not passed one of them, right? So I think it's important to recognize that I think for people who are thinking about the training, to not recognize a failing mark as a failure of yourself when you do that. It's a failure of the application of the skills, and more time is needed. And I've seen that over seeing people come back after not passing, and they tend to do quite a bit better, right? They're less less tentative. They have the skills more dialed, and they know what they need to do, right? And I think that's a big thing. Yeah. So we're kind of getting near the end here, and I'd love to see if there's any more questions from from the crowd out there. You guys have been great in firing those in. And maybe while we're waiting for that to happen, I don't know if you guys, any questions that you guys want to bring up before we sort of move to wrapping up?
Not really any questions. I guess just sort of, it's a super rewarding career path. The education process is, it's a really unique certification to get. And if it's something that you're thinking of, and the mountains are your passion, I'd highly recommend following your passion, and you'll be rewarded. It's a good time guiding, and getting people to the top of mountains or taking people down one of the best ski runs they've ever had in their life is a pretty good day at the office in my books.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it is a really rewarding job, and there's some hardship up front, but it is fun. You meet great people, and for guests out there, we really thank you for coming out with us. Like it's fantastic getting to know you and see you progress as well. I think that's one of the things that's fantastic about the profession as well, as you watch somebody gain skills as well, and it's always fun to watch the confidence grow there. Great. Well, I haven't seen any other questions come in at this point. So I guess just thank you guys for tuning in, and remember that we got these every Wednesday, 2:00, and we'll have another one up. We'll give some more details on that as the week comes on here. So we hope to see you there. And thanks to Jacob and Tim for your time on this one, and great to hear your stories. Thanks a lot, guys.
Yeah, thanks for joining, guys.
Yeah.
All right.
See you guys soon.
Bye, everyone.